So the metaphor about the boiling frogs is a classic example of how we don't deal very well with incremental change, but respond rather suddenly and rather well to sudden change. And that's kind of reflected in environmental policy in general. Generally, environmental policy deals with change that's somewhat obvious and has a very direct impact on us quite well. But when change is incremental and it's not as obvious, then environmental policy has been largely unsuccessful, and very clear examples of that has been environmental policy related to climate change or biodiversity loss. In the Lorax, we can see that some of the younger generation of oncelers that were probably involved in the harvesting of the truffle forest towards the end of the story probably had no memory or no experience of the truffle forest in its pristine state. And so it's very difficult for that generation to make informed decisions about what they should be doing in relation to that truffle forest environment. But even on a smaller timescale, the Onceler community didn't heed the warnings that they had, such as the species extinctions, because they didn't link those species extinctions to the values that they held for the forest, which was the actual truffle tree harvesting and the success of that. So in resilience thinking, there's a distinction made between two different types of variables. There's the fast variable, and this is the classic variable that goes through a radical change or shift as a response to a system changing state. In the Lorax, the classic example is the actual viability of the Thneed industry. So the other variable is the slow variable or the independent variable, and this variable is actually the variable that leads to the shift in state of a system should it cross a threshold. And in the Lorax, an example of such a variable was actually the recruitment of the truffle trees. As we remember, the barbaloots were actually responsible for eating the truffle fruit, and through that process of digestion they scarified the truffle seed and made it viable so that it could regrow in the soil. The extinction of the barbaloots meant that from that point onwards there wasn't the ability to make those truffle seeds viable, and the recruitment of the trees obviously decreased radically after that point. So it would have been really good for the Onceler community to have had the ability to monitor the viability of the seeds and the recruitment of the trees in order to maintain the viability of the Thneed industry. But as we saw, they actually were looking at the wrong part of the system in order to ensure their future viability. And that's actually quite common in a lot of things that we monitor. So we might just have to start thinking about what we're looking at in terms of making sure that our communities remain viable in the future.